What's up, everybody? Tonight is the very first episode of the Shady Sports Spring Football Reports. So as you all know, we're huge football fans, specifically alternative football. Leagues like the XFL and USFL are reasons why most of us are fans here. So real quick, before we get into the topics for tonight, why don't we go ahead and go around real quick, and we can introduce ourselves. Travis, why don't you start, and we'll work our way back up to me.
My name's Travis. Me and Sam started doing the USFL podcast last spring, breaking down the games and previewing every single week. And as he knows, I favor the XFL more than the USFL, so he knows I'm especially excited for this. And I'm going to be also a DC Defenders fan, so very excited.
Absolutely. Michael, how long have you been in XFL?
Oh, sorry, yeah. No, you're good. You're good. I just thought we were going to jump right over into it. I'm Michael Washington. I was with a network called the Alternative Football News Network back in 2019. AAF had started. The XFL was announced for 2020, and the guy got us together, and I did that for about 2 years. After the leagues folded, we kind of parted, and everything fell apart with them. And I saw Sam's post online and was like, hey, let's do it. I miss it. So XFL 2023, here I am.
Absolutely.
DC Defenders fan as well. So
absolutely.
Travis and I are there.
No doubt. So we got a lot of guys on the East Coast in the group, which is kind of cool. We're situated all over. We got guys in the UK, like I was just talking about, Colorado, a lot of people in Pennsylvania, Maine, Massachusetts. So yeah, we're a little bit all over the place, but at the same time, it kind of gives us different perspectives, different outlooks on the different leagues and whatnot. But as you can tell, I'm a huge Philadelphia sports fan. Obviously, you guys have seen my face a million times if you've watched this channel before. I'm Sam. I've been an alternative football fan for as long as I can remember. I think the first XFL kickoff, or I guess scrum, because it wasn't a kickoff at that time. I remember watching in my living room with my parents, and so it's been a long journey to this point. I never covered football until about a year ago. And then, like Travis said, we started that USFL podcast, and here we are covering the XFL in 2023. Super excited about the fact that they're back. And we once again have not one, but two alternative football leagues to cover. Alternative outdoor football leagues. Sorry. I need to be specific here because we cover a little bit of everything. But so we wanted to start with how to watch this week's games, because as we know, we're only 5 days away from the first kickoff. I believe it's 1 p.m. this Saturday, and so it'll be very interesting to see exactly how these games go. But let's start with how to actually watch the games. So for you guys, let's start with oh man, I just closed the schedule. Give me just a second.
I have it up. I have it up too. So
okay, perfect. So we actually start with Vegas and Arlington on ABC at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
3 p.m. Eastern.
3 p.m. Eastern time. 1 p.m. on my side of the world. I automatically do that in my brain, I guess. And then we also have Orlando Guardians versus Houston Roughnecks on ESPN and FX at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. St. Louis Battlehawks at San Antonio Brahmas, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday the 19th on ABC. And then Seattle Sea Dragons versus your guys' DC Defenders at their house, Sunday, February 19th, 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. What are your immediate thoughts about where these games are located in terms of broadcast networks?
I mean, my first impressions, of course, is the networks that they're on. They're on ABC, they're on ESPN. They have good network deals, and I think that's really going to be beneficial for them this season.
I think that with ABC, you take a look at the way that the league, spread this out. It's not a mistake that the first game's on ABC. I mentioned it in our chat, and Seattle and DC closing on ESPN isn't a surprise either, because NBC football on Sunday nights with the NFL is really well watched, and ESPN wants to try to get a little bit of that, and they have the Monday night game. But I also want to point out that if you have ESPN Plus, all the games are streamed on ESPN Plus. So you don't need like FX to see this. You don't have to have ESPN if you have ESPN Plus. As long as you have a TV provider, you can watch all the games on ESPN Plus.
Absolutely. So for any of those people out there that have kids, right now Disney Plus is running a package where you can get Disney Plus, I believe it's Hulu, and then also ESPN Plus. Trust me, it's well worth the money. That's what we did. Excuse me, losing my voice a little bit there. But basically, it's one of these things where, like you said, I think that they're definitely playing into which teams they think are going to be the better teams in the league and trying to get them in front of the most eyes this weekend. So it's definitely interesting to see how they arranged everything. I like the fact that there's no delay. You know what I mean? Like the Super Bowl was just yesterday. We have 5 weekdays, and then boom, we're right back into football season, and it's like we never left off. You know, it kind of builds on that hype of the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts about following the Super Bowl so closely?
I think it's a good idea because, I mean, immediately that window opens up. The broadcasting time for the time that the NFL would typically be playing games opens up. And, I mean, there's people like us who are already missing football and we're only one day out. So I think it's. I think they also did the same strategy in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, and the AAF did a very similar strategy too, where they started the week or 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, also, I believe. So, I mean, I think it's a good strategy. It's very different from what the USFL does, how they start all the way later in, is it April, I believe. So it's a different strategy, but I like the aggressiveness to start that close to right after the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Yeah, USFL starts April 15th. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I think for me, it's when you take a look at the spring leagues, going back to the AAF and going back to XFL 2020, the two things that stand out is week one is always got the most eyes on it. People tune in because they want to pay attention. They want to see what it's going to be like. Now, granted, it tapers off because warmer weather comes. People want to get out more, so it's a little bit tougher. But it usually holds pretty well. The USFL proved that last year. Their numbers were very comparable to the MLS, very comparable to the MLB, NBA. They were actually beating a lot of those sports leagues in a lot of categories. The the smart thing is the marketing behind the XFL with who they have in place really brings a lot of attention to this because make no mistake about it, in XFL 2020, and they did really good numbers for what the spring is bringing. The Rock is a completely different person than Vince McMahon. There's no shadiness, no offense, Sam. There's no shadiness involved with the name like that around that. Where Vince, I think, legitimately wanted XFL 2020 to succeed. The Rock is a former player who has a very good business partner in Danny Garcia, and they've kind of really done everything right as far as like putting people in place to make sure that this is legit and this succeeds. So I think there's more eyes on it this year, and getting that deal with ESPN I think is huge too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that can be overstated. I wanted to bring up something as well that, like you spoke about, Michael, you brought up the fact that it seems that the XFL kind of played into the betting odds from Vegas when they came up with the schedule. So I wanted to go ahead and bring that up for us. So here are the current betting odds per gamblingsites.com. So
And not to cut you off, Sam, and I saw these odds earlier, and I kind of raised a little bit of an eyebrow to it. These ones are a little bit different than the ones that I saw, but these don't make sense to me
yeah,
when looking at the odds for it. Like at first, originally, I think that my idea behind what we were seeing with the playing into it was more from the aspect of the people who've been paying attention to spring ball who know these players a little bit more. Like Vegas and Arlington, like we've discussed it numerous times that Vegas and Arlington we think are two of the best teams in the league, if not the preview for the championship right here in week one. And DC has a very strong roster that's very spring experienced and very, they have a rookie head coach, but they have a lot of experience on this team, especially with Jordan Tiamu. Um, so I think that for me, if I was the XFL and I was looking at the schedule, this is where I would this is where I would highlight those teams. And if you look at it, Arlington Vegas opens, and we end in prime time with DC. So it didn't surprise me, and that's how I felt when I looked at it. I mean, these betting odds are a little bit off, weird to me. I'm not sure how they calculated that, but that's you know where I'm at with what I thought with the schedule.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. A couple of these teams, I'm wondering how exactly they came up with the rankings. Because, I mean, if you're going based off of experience, whether it's in a previous spring league or the NFL, what have you, I really don't think that a lot of these rankings really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, personally, I would rank Arlington a lot better. I would rank DC pretty near the top, Vegas as well. So, I mean, Orlando, that does not make any sense to me. I don't put them anywhere near Vegas in terms of talent, and I don't mean any disrespect to any of the guys on the Guardians. I know a lot of them, but at the same time, when you're looking at this from an on paper situation, to me, the Vegas Vipers are one of the best teams in the league. The DC Defenders, one of the best teams in the league. You know, Arlington Renegades, and again, one of the best teams in the league. But it'll be very interesting to see how this week's games end up kind of shaking out. Travis, is there any glaring atrocities here on this list for you?
Yeah, the Houston Roughnecks rising the ranks so much. I'm very curious about that because whenever we saw the betting odds first get released, they were around middle of the pack, which a little preview for me is about where I expect them to end up being, is around middle of the pack. So it's very interesting that as of right now, they have the best odds for the XFL title, according to that website. I do want to touch on a different betting website, DraftKings. Their betting odds are also released, and they have St. Louis at plus 400, so they're the favorites to win. And then the Seattle Sea Dragons plus 450. The Roughnecks and the Renegades are tied at 500. San Antonio Brahmas plus 550. Vegas Vipers plus 650. DC Defenders plus 750, and the Orlando Guardians plus 900. So a little bit differing opinions there with that website versus DraftKings, which is very interesting. And
oh, sorry, Travis, go ahead, finish your.
And I just think it's very interesting, like I said earlier, about how the Houston Roughnecks ended up rising so much. But you can continue your thought.
I was just going to mention that I know a lot of the odds are usually based upon how many people are betting on certain teams, and it's very possible that Houston area has kind of shown out for the Roughnecks through that website that Sam, bet was showing. The DraftKings one is probably closer to the one that I would pay attention to because I think when the DraftKings one opened, DC was plus 600 for their initial odds at plus 750. Now clearly they're not getting enough bets, so it's sliding away. But I think that DraftKings probably has more people using it than. But I don't know where the data comes from with Sam's website, so I don't know if that's just if it's multiple casinos or how that is determined with what they have. So
Absolutely, I would have to look more into that. That was just the first place I found the rankings right before we get on here, to be completely honest. But I personally would question their data for sure anyway after looking at that ranking system. But not to like touch on the betting odds too much, but like as you said, this kind of slants based on the fan bases and what they're betting. But with that in mind, I mean, I personally think there's some interesting teams on that list. What would be the team that you would put at the best odds to win the championship? Let's go Travis first. Sorry.
I mean, most of the casinos are putting the Battlehawks at very close, if not the highest odds to win the championship. So I would probably have to agree with them. I believe DraftKings had them at plus 400. I believe the website you had them at plus 450. So I mean, I understand that. I understand why they're getting that much hype, and I think it's very valid hype too, because I would put them as one of the top teams.
Michael, what are your thoughts?
For me, it's Arlington. I put money on DC only because I think DC is still one of the better teams in the league, and with those odds, I'd rather take my risk. At that point. But for me, I would say the Arlington Renegades would probably be my favorite at this point to win the championship, only because they have a coach that's returning, a system that was pretty well proven. I know that their players are not the same. It's not the same turnover for the roster, but having the experience of already being in a spring coach. I mean, if you take a look around the league, there's a lot of first time spring coaches, a lot of first time head coaches in general, and for professional football. So I think that might be why Seattle. You kind of see Seattle up there a little bit, despite their roster, in my opinion, kind of being a little suspect. But experience goes a long way with these leagues. We've talked about it a lot with the experience in this, and I mentioned it in my article as well. The experience plays a huge factor.
Absolutely, which we will get to that article here shortly. Analyze and Educate, channel ran by a buddy of mine from USFL, XFL News Hub. He covers the St. Louis Battlehawks as well as like 3 different teams for USFL currently. So they're trying to lighten up his load. But he says Renegades, then St. Louis Battlehawks. I'd be curious, what is it about the Battlehawks that you guys think makes them so good on paper currently?
I think for me, it's because A.J. McCarron's there. I think that's why everybody's really kind of is throwing it out there, because A.J. McCarron has the most NFL experience out of the quarterbacks that are there. The rest of the roster kind of fills out, but Marcel Aitman is there as well at the wide receiver spot. And I know that USFL News Hub, I think, ranked their top 10 players to keep an eye on, and Aitman was at the top of that list. So McCarron and Aitman being there, I think, kind of plays into that. But for me, I just don't know if their whole roster is complete. So that's why I don't have St. Louis in that spot personally.
Yeah, just to continue on what he was saying, I mean, A.J. McCarron is a big factor why they're ranked that high. The most NFL experience. He has the high-level college experience, too. Been on multiple NFL teams, of course. He's been around. So that's definitely something to look at. And I do like other pieces of their roster. I think they have a very good wide receiver room. And I think the running back room is pretty solid also. Of course, there's going to be other questions like how does their offensive line turn out? How does their defense turn out? It's not just weapons, but that's what really has them at near the top for me.
That's fair. I mean, there is a lot of experience there. And Pat says well-rounded team, good running backs online with alternate football experience. Biggest question is defensive backs with Ben DeLuca and Nate Meters. So that's actually a really good analysis on that roster because me personally, I'm a little concerned about their defense and the way it's built. But I am originally a 2020 St. Louis Battlehawks fan. I'm probably going to be rooting for them, but I also will be rooting for the Vipers, given that they're a little bit more geographically close to me. But hopefully I can actually get out there and catch a game. He also says most well-rounded tight end room. And, I mean, hey, Anthony Beck's your coach, so that's to be expected, I suppose. But moving on to our next topic at hand, what are your guys' power rankings currently? Travis, why don't you go ahead and run down your 8?
Oh man, I was hoping I wouldn't have to go first, but I'll run it in reverse order. I'll start at number 8 and then I'll go up to number 1 for me. So for me, I have at number 8, and this is mainly because of a quarterback that they signed that Sam knows I do not like. Is going to be the Orlando Guardians, because I have questions at their quarterback. If DeAndre Francois starts, they might end up being higher, but I do not believe in Paxton Lynch whatsoever. I think the running back room is very questionable. They do have good weapons on offense at the wide receiver position, but I'm very unsure about the running backs, very unsure about other pieces on their team, and the quarterback position specifically is what I'm really concerned about. So Orlando Guardians at number 8. This is going to be a shocker that I don't think a lot of people are going to agree with, but this is another quarterback who might start that I do not like, and that is why the Seattle Sea Dragons are at number 7 for me. Do not like Ben DiNucci. I have a lot of family that's Cowboys fans, so I watched every game that he played in for the Cowboys, and I'm not impressed whatsoever about him. The team looked 1,000 times better when Garrett Gilbert came in and was only on the team for like 3 days before he ended up having to start, and they looked way better than they did in all of the games DiNucci played in. I think if Steven Montez starts, this team has a lot more potential. I also have problems with the weapons they have too. I don't love any of their wide receivers. I mean, you have Josh Gordon, but he might be over the hill at this point. We're going to find that out. And aside from that, I don't love any of their other weapons. Number 6 is going to be the Houston Roughnecks for me. I think they're a relatively well-rounded team, but this is a team that I think obviously can climb or fall in these rankings. We just need to see how they perform at the end of the day. Question marks around Cole McDonald. If he does end up getting the start, I like him as a player, and I hope he does play well. So I'd like to see them rise on my list, but for now I have them at number 6. The San Antonio Brahmas are going to be number 5 for me. I do like a lot of their pieces on their offense, specifically their running back room, and I do think their quarterback situation is very interesting. They have 3 guys who have a chance to start. I'm not sure if it's going to be Jack Cohn. That's who I see a lot of people thinking it might be. But that's apparently going to be announced tomorrow. So we'll see who's going to be the official starter. And I have them circled here as underdogs. I think they have a lot of potential to end up being one of the higher echelon teams by the end of the season if they develop properly. Number 4, I have the Arlington Renegades. They do have a lot of good pieces on their offense. They have good pieces on their defense. I just think it's going to be a thing where I just ended up liking other teams better, so that's why they ended up being at number 4 for me. There's nothing inherently wrong with their roster, but just have to see if they perform the way they should. Number 3, I have my own DC Defenders, and I definitely have a big circle X on them saying that they have a lot of potential to end up making it all the way to a championship if they play the way they should. They have a lot of good pieces on defense and offense, a lot of experience on both sides of the ball. They just need to end up performing. Question marks around, how the head coach performs. My rankings are mostly purely based off just talent level on these teams. Coaching is a huge factor with these spring leagues, but I just have mine. My rankings are mostly based off talent level. At number 2, I have the Vegas Vipers, probably the best wide receiver room in the XFL, and they have a lot of good pieces on defense too. They have Vic Beasley, longtime NFL veteran, at their edge rusher spot. And then I already touched on him a little bit earlier. My number 1 is going to be the St. Louis Battlehawks. Veteran quarterback. I like the running back room, really good wide receiver room. We just have to see if their defense plays the way it should.
All right. I mean, definitely a solid list. I'm actually surprised DC isn't higher, to be quite honest. But I feel like Michael is probably going to rectify that for you right now. So why don't you go ahead and go?
Yeah, for sure. So my offensive rankings were just based strictly on the offense, didn't factor in the defense, obviously. So when I do these rankings, they're going to be different than what my article says for some people. But for me, number 8 is the Orlando Guardians. I think that's going to be probably common across the board. A lot of questions at quarterback. As a Florida State guy, love DeAndre Francois as a player, but he was way too inconsistent. Led to transferring twice. If he gets the start though and plays to even 80% of his potential, like Travis said, they have a chance to skyrocket up the board for me. I actually had them ranked 7th in the offensive rankings list, ahead of the team at 7, which is San Antonio. It might be a little bit low for some people, but this team to me is the biggest question mark. The quarterback room is one of those rooms that you look at and go, all right, Reed Sinnett was definitely in the NFL for a while. Juwan Pass has very high potential, a great athlete with unlimited, untapped. We don't know where he is as far as where his ceiling is. And then Jack Cohn at Notre Dame, big time school, didn't really impress me much at Notre Dame. Played well in some games, but in some of the bigger games, he kind of disappeared. And in the XFL with a short season, almost every game is a big game. So will it be the Jack Cohn that showed up against games like Indiana when Indiana was terrible, or will it be like the Jack Cohn against, Clemson? Like that becomes the big question there. So for me, San Antonio at 7, but they do have potential to surprise people. I got Seattle at 6. I don't like the quarterback situation at all. Seattle and Houston, who's at 5 for me, are very interchangeable. I don't like Brandon Silvers at all for Houston. I think that I think he's absolute garbage. I think Cole McDonald's the the best quarterback in that room. I like Caleb Ellaby as well. I think Caleb Ellaby has a lot of potential. I watched a lot of Western Michigan, but I watched Hawaii strictly for Cole McDonald when he was there. So I would have Houston strictly at 5 just because they do have Cole McDonald and Seattle at 6 in that sense. Number 4 for me is St. Louis. I know a lot of people love this team. AJ McCarron is just so meh, I guess is the best way to put it. He's just so, he's just like, there's nothing to get excited about with AJ McCarron. Proven winner, been a winner everywhere he's gone. I mean, he even wore some games at Cincinnati, actually almost won a playoff game for them. But AJ McCarron, yay. Like, it's just like one of those things. He's going to run out on the field, and I'm just going to be like, okay, cool, yeah, awesome. It's almost as bad as some of these other guys that are in this league. Number 3 is DC. I didn't rectify it. There's no rectification there. DC is number 3 for me. I do agree though that there is a giant bullseye with DC that they could be a championship caliber team to run with. They are, to me, the second best team in the North. I think there's a power discrepancy, in case you haven't noticed by my rankings, that the North is way stronger than the South. And that includes all the rosters. I mean, like everything from top to bottom. So it's going to be a tough conference to win out of. But I think DC, with the experience, if Jordan Tiamu can be what we think he can be, or what we know he can be, this team's going to be very dangerous, especially that run game. A lot of weapons. Jaquez Ezzard could be Cavante Turpin, of the XFL this year. Number 2 for me is Arlington. Love the team. I mean, number 2 for me is Vegas. Sorry. Love the team overall. Defense is really, really strong. Offense is strong. Don't like the running back room. And I know that Vegas plays a spread offense, but these spread offenses in a professional level very rarely work without a good run game. They have 2 running backs on rosters. And I'm sure they're going to move their wide receivers around, try to, get the mismatch the weapons. But with 2 running backs, they don't have, in my opinion, a true bell cow to be able to wear down those close games. You need to wear these defenses down in those close games. Vegas concerns me for that reason, because if DC's defense and St. Louis's defense is as good as we think they could be, it could be very, very long season for Vegas overall. So Vegas is probably the one team that I have it to that I could easily see drop down this list pretty quickly after week 2 or 3. Arlington at number 1, I think they're the most well-rounded team. Touched on coaching earlier. Just think overall that they are the most balanced, and they have the best tight end room. I don't care about St. Louis and Anthony Beck being a tight end coach. Like, Arlington is the best one with Sal Calinella. I mean, maybe that's biased because I'm a New Orleans fan from the USFL, but Sal Calinella and Kyle Slaughter should hopefully, if Slaughter can reduce the mistakes, Arlington will easily, I think, walk in on in the South, because of the rest of the South just doesn't look good.
That is completely fair, and I was laughing basically the whole time you were talking, because my rankings are almost identical. So basically at 8, I've got Orlando. I can't say anything that you guys haven't already said about Orlando. I mean, basically right now, my concern is their quarterback room. I will say that Paxton Lynch played extremely well in Week 10 of the USFL, so I am encouraged by what he could possibly do with this offense and the talent that's in it. I'm extremely encouraged by the fact that Andrew Jamil's here. I think he's going to be a breakout wide receiver in this league. I think he's definitely an outdoor receiver, especially in the slot. He reminds me a lot of, not to throw out another white slot receiver, but Julian Edelman. They very similar in terms of play style. Very shifty. So I'm excited about him. Excited about a lot of players on this roster, to be quite honest. There are a lot of FCF guys on this roster, but ultimately, overall talent-wise, there's just a lot of question marks. You don't know how these FCF guys are going to translate to the outdoor game for the most part. So that's a big question mark right there for me. And then ultimately going forward, San Antonio is my 7th team. I actually have them as one of my teams that could be a really fast riser. I like Reed Sinnett. I think he's a great quarterback. I think if he ends up as the starter, they have a very good opportunity to be a solid team. I like a lot of the weapons that they have on the team. I would be a lot more encouraged by their offensive weapons if I believe it's Calvin Turner. Hopefully I'm not getting that wrong name or that last name incorrect.
Just cut you out. Calvin Turner was put on the reserve list. I don't know what that means for the league or what that means for him, but he was put on the reserve list. So
Exactly. So that's my concern with their offense. I mean, if he was there, I think they'd probably be at number 5 on my list. And I know that's a large leap for one player, but I personally think what he brought to this offense would have changed it so dramatically that it would have been night and day difference. But right now you look at that offense and it's a bunch of bangers. It's a bunch of guys that are going to beat you, by running up the gut. They're not going to be able to bounce it outside. They're not going to, beat you in the screen game, really. There's going to be it's a very one-dimensional offense at this point in my eyes when it comes to the run game. Number 6 is Seattle. This has a lot to do with the fact that I think ultimately they're going to put Montez on the bench to start. I personally think Montez is the better of the 2 quarterbacks. So I think DiNucci is going to get the first initial start. He's got more starting experience in the NFL, so they're probably going to lean on that. I like a lot of their roster. Josh Gordon is a big question mark to me. Can he still do it? I think he's probably got the requisite talent, but at this point, I want to say he's like 34, 35. So he's definitely on the back 9 of his career. So it'll be interesting to see how much he's got left in the tank, given the way his career's kind of gone. Houston, I personally put them at number 5. I think they could be one of the fastest risers on this list. I personally do not like Brandon Silvers. Sorry, go ahead. 31? Oh, Josh Gordon?
Yeah, sorry, he's 31.
Really? Wow.
I forgot I had my mic up, so I was muted. So yeah, no, he's 31.
Gotcha. Wow. I thought he was much older than that. So maybe he's got more left in the tank than I thought. But Houston, as far as they go, I like Cole McDonald. I think that if he ends up being the starting quarterback in Houston, this team can be dominant. Personally, I think if he steps in, they will be dominant. I like a lot of their pieces on offense. I like their defense, the way it's built. It's solid. Probably not spectacular by any stretch, but it's going to be a bend but don't break type defense. Moving on, St. Louis is my number 4 team. I personally, again, not that excited about AJ McCarron. I personally think that, yes, he's got a lot of winning experience. He has almost won an NFL playoff game, like you said. But at the same time, I watch spring football because I want to see the up and coming guys. I want to see the guys that still have an NFL future, that, maybe guys who could leap up to the next level and, be the guy who was that diamond in the rough that the XFL found or the USFL found, similar to a Cavante Turpin. And to me, AJ McCarron is just a retread. You're basically taking a guy who's at the back end of his NFL career, who probably will never be back at more than, a QB3 or high end or low end QB2. And you're sticking him in this league, which is great. He'll probably have decent success, honestly. But at the same time, I think you're kind of missing the point. I personally would have probably had Ryan Willis be the starter there, but as we all know, he's gone now. Moving on, Arlington is my number 3 team. I like the fact that they went out and got a lot of USFL talent. I think the fact that they leaned very heavily on spring league players is very intelligent, because a lot of these guys know what they're in for when it comes to spring leagues. They know that they're not necessarily going to have all the amenities that they would have at the NFL level. They're very, fast to adapt to offenses and stuff, typically, because they're typically the guys that are bouncing from practice squad to practice squad to practice squad to continue their careers. DC is my number 2 team. I personally really, really, really like their quarterback room. I think that the fact that they went out and got 2 guys that are going to be their backup quarterbacks that have positional versatility is beyond the most intelligent move that I saw in this entire XFL draft process. We saw last season with the USFL that injuries affected a lot of teams when it came to quarterbacks. You saw backup quarterbacks start for almost every team in the league, and it had a dramatic effect on a lot of these teams and the success that they had. So in this particular situation, you can carry 3 quarterbacks and you're not necessarily hurting yourself at other depth or in depth for other positions like wide receiver and tight end, because Dungy can go out and play tight end. De'Aaron King can go play in the slot. He could probably even play a little running back if it came to it. So I personally really, really like how they built that quarterback room, and the rest of their offense in general is just, it's awesome. I personally think they're going to be in the championship game most likely. And then last but not least, my number 1 team is Vegas. I just spoke about the fact that I don't like that there's a lot of retreads in this league, but there's certain retreads that I don't think really got the opportunity to see out their NFL careers. And Martavis Bryant, to me, is one of those guys. He never got the opportunity to really play up to his potential in the NFL because he was constantly in trouble. Well, now he seems to have kind of gotten his life straight, and hopefully he'll stay on the field with the XFL, and he'll be put up against guys that, quite honestly, probably are not the physical talents that he is. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he can do in this league. He didn't do much in the FCF last season, but I am firmly encouraged that he's going to be pretty solid. I like the rest of their wide receiver room. They brought in Geronimo Allison. They also have Jeff Badette there. There's just a tremendous amount of talent on every side of the ball. And then obviously they brought in Brett Hundley. Now, I'm a Brian Scott fan as a player, so I personally think that he would have been a solid quarterback, but we all heard the news. You know, he had kind of played poorly and was falling down the depth chart, and they ultimately brought Hundley in. Regardless of if Hundley's ready to go or not, I'm not scared because they got Luis Perez right there to step in week 1 if that's what they so choose, and then Hundley to take over long term. So this quarterback room, once again, one of the best in the league, right next to DC. So I personally think when you look at these leagues, you got to look at the quarterback position. 2 best teams, 2 best quarterback rooms, in my opinion.
I need to make an edit on Vegas on what I said. Apparently they have signed 2 running backs or moved players or whatever it may be, but there was only 2 guys here before. There's 4 here now. So they definitely have brought 2 people in. So I just wanted to mention
Burt that. And
John Lovett.
There you go. Oh,
I believe it was he already there. Was it DeAndre Torrey from North Texas?
Yeah, John Lovett was already there. DeAndre Torrey, I think, was in. Oh man, he was on another team. He must have got picked up off waivers.
Yeah, DeAndre Torrey, and I liked him at North Texas. It was just the John Lovett Rod Smith combo when I was originally talking about them. So I'm not. If it was just those 2, I wouldn't be as thrilled. But adding some depth is nice. Like Absolutely. I said, I know they're playing the spread, but I just adding depth is always a good thing to me.
Yeah, and to your credit, you mentioned that they're running the spread. Well, Brian Burt is a guy who can play a little bit of wide receiver as well, so he's a guy to watch. Rod Smith has some versatility to play some fullback as well, if I'm not mistaken. So there is some utility there for other positions in terms of those couple players. So maybe that was their thought process in bringing those specific guys in since we had talked originally about all that situation. So here's a comment that is not at all related to the XFL, but I feel obligated to put it up. Chris Mason still thinks Hurts is the best QB in the NFL. So just had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just leave it alone. We'll leave it alone.
He's a very good running back.
Oh, Dan, that's harsh, right in the heart. There.
I knew. I mean, it wasn't meant to like personally just twist the dagger in your heart or anything. I just felt like saying it because I know it gets Eagles fans kind of riled up a little bit.
Definitely, completely honest. They're probably going nuts right now. There's probably a riot in Philly right now. In fact, Travis, you'd probably know better than we are. How's the state of the union right over there in Pennsylvania?
I am not sure actually, but it's a thing we don't talk about. I'll put it like that. I'm happy that I'm more on the eastern side of the state, or the western side of the state actually. But it's a thing that have not been here. Like normally you'll be in the gas station. Oh, you catch the Eagles game, or oh, you catch the Steelers game. Not talking about it. Like.
That's awesome. Probably a good thing at this moment.
Yeah.
A lot of salty fans. So while we're on this subject, or right before we get into our previews, I'm going to go ahead and present and show Michael recently wrote an article for ShadySportsNetwork.com. So we're going to look at his offensive preview. A lot of these players have unfortunately been released since he wrote this because they did in fact do final cuts fairly recently.
I should have waited.
It is one of those things, but anyway, very great article. Definitely check it out. You can literally type in ShadySportsNetwork.com XFL 2023 offensive preview, and it should come right up. But as he spoke about, his rankings in this article are a little bit different. So we got DC here right at the number 1 spot.
That was just the Northern Division. I broke them up by divisions. So
gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah.
Vegas Vipers, number 2 spot. St. Louis, Seattle, which I'm actually kind of surprised you put them that high. What are your thoughts with Seattle?
It wasn't that high. They were 4th in that division.
Yeah, he had them by
Their
division.
offensive rank was C+.
My mistake.
So.
My mistake.
Yeah. But if you go back and look at the overall rank, the offensive rank, like if you see where the B is in number 3, if you go down to the Southern Division now, the second team on this list is like a B for the offensive ranking. Like that's how much of a drop off it is for me. I think I put Houston at 2, I believe, in the Southern Division.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris has another comment. Sloter under center, goes shotgun, calls for the snap, leaves the gun, throws the connect, touchdown. That's pretty much what we're all thinking too. If you are playing an XFL fantasy league, I firmly encourage that you go get Sloter or Canella.
Sal Cannella is going to be the best tight end in the league, and I think that he very easily could lead the Arlington Renegades in receiving across the board. But you know, the thing about it is with these offensive rankings, there's always somebody that stands out in some aspect, like a wild card. Like for Seattle, it was Harrison Frost. We don't really know anything about him. Out of West Georgia, if you go take a look at his stats, you know, and stats don't tell the whole story, but if you go take a look at his stats, he was very productive at West Georgia. Quarterback eligible this year to come into the NFL, so he's young. Most likely was going to go undrafted, may not even sign a contract with the NFL. So it made sense for Seattle to go get somebody like that. I'm not as big of a Steven Montez fan as you two are, and I'm not as big of a Ben DiNucci fan as some of the other people are. Like I'm kind of like with Travis on that front with DiNucci. Frost is a guy that I don't suspect will probably play this year, but if they give Frost an opportunity to maybe see the field, he might be one of the guys that surprises. And if you look at every single one of these teams, especially with the quarterback position, there's one person in each room that could be that surprise. Like De'Aaron King, we talked about him with DC. We all know how productive he was at Houston. We know what he was going to do at Miami until he got hurt. We know that he played wide receiver and has the versatility. But overall, we still don't really know what De'Aaron King is. We don't know who he is because we haven't seen him yet on this level. So there's every single one of these teams when I was doing the offensive thing is like at each position, there's a guy that could really surprise. Like for DC in the running back room, it's Raquel Armstead for me. I absolutely love Raquel Armstead. Abram Smith is a great running back, first overall pick, but I could easily see Raquel take over this. He had an unfortunate situation with COVID in 2020, which almost killed him twice. And Jacksonville just kind of was like, we need to kind of move on. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we kind of need to and he just lost his spot because of that. So I just wanted to bring that up right quick because obviously we can sit here and talk about everybody under the sun that we all know about, but there's always a guy who comes along on each one of these rosters at each position that we didn't expect to really kind of it just really takes us by storm. And quarterback's always one of the premier spots in the spring league. So sorry for that little rant.
No, you're good. In fact, I'm glad that you brought up Harrison Frost because I think that was an incredibly intelligent move by Seattle and by the XFL in general. These are the type of guys that you need to be targeting. If you can bring in NFL draft eligible players and hopefully elevate their stock and then put them in the league, how amazing is that for your visibility for players, recruitment of future players? I mean, you're going to be bringing in the cream of the crop of the undrafted free agents, the guys who think, hey, I was, one step away from being drafted. Why don't I just go play in the XFL rather than taking this current futures deal or whatever it may be? And then I'll go ahead, up my stock. And then by next season, I'm, in the NFL and, solidifying my position rather than fighting for a practice squad spot or whatever it may be. And I think over time, that's something that both of these leagues are going to end up getting to, because we've seen guys like Cavante Turpin get to the NFL and have success. So while we're talking about Houston currently, how surprised were you guys to see Adrian Killings released?
Was he released or traded? I thought he got traded.
He was traded. He was traded to Arlington.
Traded. You're right.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, I was surprised.
I was very surprised with that.
I would agree. There was actually quite a few surprising cuts and stuff that moved on that I did not expect. So anyway, let's move on to the Orlando Guardians. You have a B- on their offensive rank. What do you like so much about their offense?
Go down.
Oh.
Go down.
Sorry, C+.
C+. Yep. I did the ranking at the end of it, not the front of it.
My bad. Completely my fault.
No, you're good.
Scroll down.
Go
ahead.
No, honestly, it was just more or less Dantes Bird. I like him a lot. He was a guy who played, I think it was San Diego in the AAF, and had a very solid, 5 games they were around. And, he was in the XFL 2020. I don't think he put up, I think it was Seattle he was with. And I think Brandon Silver's throwing him the ball out there. So, I mean, he was destined to not really perform to his level at that point. But I like him a lot. I think he has a chance to, break the, he has a chance to break out the defenses, take the top off the defense. He has, big playability. And I like some of their big body guys. They moved Cody Latimer to tight end. But he's a good sized tight end with some playmaking ability. His biggest issues were injuries and his inability to really separate, especially with Denver. I mean, you probably know a little bit more about him in Denver than I do. And Charleston Rambo had a very productive career at Miami. He's another good sized guy with a chance, and with a chance to get those contested balls if he's able. And then Eli Rogers, he was the first overall pick in the draft. I believe he's still with the team. I don't think he got cut. Some of these guys just kind of surprised me, but Eli Rogers was a guy who, he's still with them, who was the first overall pick with DC in 2020. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. That didn't actually make the team, or he got to the NFL and then came back, or something like that. I think
he made the team. He made the team, but he was kind of there.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything crazy happen, but I believe I don't want to get it wrong by saying, but I'm pretty sure either his mother or father died mid-season.
Okay, that's what it was that I was thinking of.
But I believe he's still stuck with the team for the entire season, but it was still a hard situation for him.
And if I remember correctly, I don't think DC ran a really good offense for him in that season either. For what we saw, I don't think he really meshed well with that offense. I think he has a better chance to be a little bit better with this offense because it's going to be a very run-heavy offense.
Yeah, and if you remember, in DC, they ended up starting to have struggles with their quarterback play whenever Cardell Jones started turning the ball over like crazy. Then Tyree Jackson comes in, who's not even playing quarterback anymore. He's now a tight end.
Right.
And they just ended up not throwing the ball nearly as much as with him. And their wide receivers didn't really get a whole lot of love, towards the second half of that season, even though the season was only 5 games long. But
right. But much better arm. I don't even want to say much better arm talent because it's Paxton Lynch, but a possible talent upgrade at the arm with the arm talent in Orlando if somebody else other than Paxton Lynch starts. So it could be useful for Eli Rogers. But that's kind of where I'm at with the Guardians. But if you look, it's a C+, and they were number 3 on this list. Like I said, it was a huge discrepancy for me between the Northern Division and Southern Division, especially on the offensive ranks.
That's completely fair. Real quick, I did want to touch on Cody Latimer. You talked about guys that could potentially take over the league that are kind of sleepers. To me, he's a little bit more of a sleeper than he should be, just because of the position change. But I actually remember him playing quite a bit. He was a second-round pick in 2014 for the Broncos, so very recent guy in Denver. But he he had some off-field issues, and I think that's really the only reason that he's not currently in the NFL, because his last season in the NFL in 2019, he played for the Giants. He was targeted like 40 times that season, caught like 24 passes, 300 yards, couple touchdowns. He also was their primary kick returner. So kind of interesting to see that he's resurfaced in the XFL. He's added 10 pounds. He's going to play tight end. I mean, this is a guy who was 6'2 and a half, 215 when he played in the NFL. So now he's about 6'2 and a half, 225, but he runs about a 4.40. So like that's a guy who could be dominant at tight end if he can block and get on the field 3 downs. So it'll be very interesting to see exactly how they use him for sure.
And I want to touch on as well their running back group. The Orlando structure, by the way. I mean, we touched on it in the chat a little bit, but the Orlando structure, the team makeup is very strange. It's a very oddly built team. They cut Calvin Taylor, who I don't know if it was just injuries again for him or if he was just struggling. They have 2 running backs. They haven't added anybody. Jermaine Martin. If you didn't see him ever play at North Carolina A&T, you really missed out on a guy. But he's all of like 5'7", and he might be 220 pounds. He's thick, like he's a very thick running back. Very limited, like top end speed, but I think top end speed on running backs is very overrated, personally. And very rarely do you see 20-yard plus runs from running backs unless it just happens to be a great scheme or whatever. For the most part, you want those guys that go 5, 6, 7, 8 yards and you look good. But Orlando is very odd. I don't know. It's just an odd makeup of a team. If it wasn't for the wide receiving group, this team would probably have been below San Antonio easily for the offensive scheme. And San Antonio isn't because of they're bad. It's just they're huge question marks,
Absolutely. Just to your point about Jermaine Martin, in 2019 for North Carolina INT, 187 carries, 1,446 yards, 23 touchdowns, 7.7 yards per carry. Yep. That is insane. I mean, if you got concerns about that dude's top end speed, you're not watching film because obviously he's very productive. I mean,
to be fair though, a lot of North Carolina A&T runs a lot of the option. It was a lot of option runs. Quarterback ran a lot, so the team was built to run. So that 7.7 yards per carry is fantastic for them. But that's essentially where their set was. So they ran the ball a lot. So I don't know if Orlando is going to use a spread. Judging from this, if they're using a spread, I'm not sure it's going to be the best fit for Jermaine. But the dude is super talented, so I hope that they run the wheels off on him personally. So somebody's a really big Guardians fan. Hey, Chris.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy A++. Lattimore got with the program. I agree. I've always liked Lattimore because he did a lot off the field for like charities and whatnot. But he is one of those guys. He's had some issues off field. He got in trouble for, I think one of them was driving while intoxicated, if I'm not mistaken. So he also got assault at one point in 2020. So I think that's a big reason why he's not in the NFL currently. But I'm excited about him in particular. But, Orlando winning the $1 Million Bowl. I don't think they're calling that it. They're calling it that anymore. But we'll see. So anyway, moving on to the San Antonio Brahmas, which you actually have ranked as a C, which is the lowest ranking in the South Division. What did you not like about the Brahmas?
It's not that I didn't like anything. It's just they're filled with question marks. Like they're as far as the experience factor is concerned, their wide receivers. There's some names here that you recognize if you pay attention, but they're not names that are like. They don't stand out to you. Like I recognize TJ Vasher and Jalen Tolliver as players that had, productive games, but they didn't put together fully like great seasons. But this is also one of those groups that, like Landon Akers, I know stuck with the Rams for a good chunk of the season this past year. He's a rookie. I know DeReese Roberson Jr. has, a decent upside, and could be one of these teams that really surprises you with one of the receivers that emerges out of nowhere, type of situation. The running backs are all very solid. John Hillman had some playing time, even started a few games for the Giants. Kalen Ballage, to me, coming out of Arizona State, was legit one of the best inside runners. I think he was very underrated as an inside runner. He just never put it together as a whole. And Jacques Patrick, we've seen him. We've seen him for I think the Tampa Bay in 2020, if I'm correct, and Florida State. Being a Florida State fan, I've seen what he's done. It's just I don't know if the rest of the team is good enough for them to overcome it. That's the problem. And one of the other question marks is obviously quarterback. We touched on Reed Sennett, who I do like. Jawan Pass, we just don't know who he is. If Pass does end up being the starter, do we get his floor or do we get his potential ceiling? And with Reed Sennett, is it where is his ceiling? You know what I mean? Like where does it sit? Is it as high as we think it could be, or is it lower? And that's really, for me, offensively, where I kind of struggled with them a little bit. And Dejon Dixon, for me, they cut him. I put right here, the key player to watch for is Dejon Dixon. I was shocked. This guy was so good at Nicholas State. He was so good. I hope he gets a chance at the USFL, because he's a guy that deserves to be in spring league, and I think that he would really surprise some people. And they cut DeAndre Goolsby, which kind of shocked me too. I was a little bit surprised by that because he had some standout games at the tight end spot in spring ball in the past too. So I don't know what to expect with them, and that's really where my biggest thing is. This team could be a C right now, but it could be a friggin' A- by the time we're done. This team is the biggest question mark for me. And Travis, I think you touched on it a little bit in your power rankings too, and Sam, I think you did as well. That it's just you don't know what you're getting with this Brahmas team.
Absolutely, Travis, you got any thoughts about the Brahmas?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ended up ranking them higher than both of you guys is because I like this running back room so much, and I always like to hope for good potential, and I see potential in all their quarterbacks, no matter who they start. I would probably either go with Reed Sinnett or Jack Cohn because I think both of them are a little bit more polished than Jawan Pass, but of course he does have a lot of potential, and he's an amazing athlete. I do like pieces of their wide receiver room and Jalen Tolliver and TJ Vasher, like you spoke of. I remember Vasher spent, I believe, the preseason with the Cowboys. I think he's like 6'6". He's a very big body. And if they can utilize him in a good way, he could end up being like their deep ball, their jump ball 50-50 man. And if they end up building this team, the way it looks like they built this team is they're going to run the ball heavy. And when they need to throw it, they have their guys who are reliable, like Jalen Tolliver, and they have their guys like TJ Vasher who can go up and get it. So obviously, I'm hoping for potential from this team, but I think this is a team that by the end of the season, it's either going to be hit or miss. They're either going to drastically surprise everybody, or they're going to be near the bottom of their power rankings and say, well, we kind of expected that.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect assessment of everything going on. Like we talked about, to me, if Calvin Turner's still there, he's not hurt or whatever may be going on with him, whether he left the league or what it is. I personally think that this offense ranks a lot higher to me. I like Calvin Turner. I think that the element that he brought to this offense would have been completely different from the other backs that are on this roster that are bigger, more inside runners. But I do like the roster that they built. Jacques Patrick obviously has some experience in previous spring leagues. We talked about the fact that they brought in Kalen Ballage. I'm a big fan of Kalen Ballage. He was pretty solid a couple seasons ago with the Chargers. Ultimately, he was a former fourth-round pick, but it's not a surprise to see that he's in spring football. In fact, his father used to play for the USFL back in the day, Howard Ballage. He was a running back as well for the Denver Gold. So definitely excited to see what he can do at this level. That wide receiver group, I think you hit the nail on the head Travis. It in my personal opinion, if you're them, you basically pound the rock, and then
I love
thanks
pound
for that,
cake.
Chris. I appreciate that.
I'm a
Totally
big man. I
Chris's
love pound
fault.
cake.
But yeah, so pound the rock, and then you ultimately just throw it up in the end zone. I mean, because you've got 6'6" TJ Vasher on one side, and I believe Tolliver is 6'3", 6'4", correct?
Yeah,
Seems
tall. Yeah, I was gonna say 6'3", 6'4". He's right in that range. Yeah.
Yeah. So they got a bunch of big targets. And one thing I liked about their offense as well is they're all very versatile. A lot of former quarterbacks at wide receiver, which a lot of people don't necessarily look at that and think about the effect that can have on an offense. But that means these guys understand offensive philosophy at a higher level than a normal receiver. You know, they've played quarterback. They've looked at it from every position. So they know how to cater to the quarterbacks to a certain extent. So I think that's another factor that a lot of people aren't really talking about this offense. It's built very heavily in Hines Ward's image, in my personal opinion.
Oh yeah, no, and all these rosters are kind of built in someone's image as far as head coach or offensive coordinator or whatever it may be. And Calvin Turner, he was him and Cole McDonald are two reasons why I watched Hawaii, staying up late to watch Hawaii on that CBS Sports Network garbage channel, whatever that is about, because they just were so much fun to watch. Again, it's super early in the Brahmas. To me, are the one team, and I will beat the horse out of this. Like, I don't care if it's dead. I will continue beating the hell out of it. They are the one team that is the biggest wild card for me. Like Travis said, they could end up being the Pittsburgh Maulers of the USFL last year, or they could end up being the surprise team, and whoever was the one that surprised, or was considered a surprise last year in the USFL. It's really up in the air. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jalen Tolliver played with the Battle Hawks in 2020? Or was it
I think it was the Vipers. I think
the Vipers. The Vipers, that's right. It was the Vipers, that's right.
Yeah, Vipers.
Because it was, yeah, that's right. Okay.
He was with Jamie Elizondo. Big
Yes.
reason why he's back with San Antonio, actually. And that was a big reason why I was surprised to see Goolsby gone. But for the sake of not, taking up all your guys' time and keeping you for the rest of the night, let's go ahead and move on into our predictions for this upcoming week's action. So let me pull up the schedule real quick one more time. Or better yet, here is our most recent article from our ranking expert, the Bryce. So let's pull this up. So, wow. Oh, this is power rankings, actually. So we'll hold off on that for a minute. Let me get the schedule up.
The Sea Dragons. I love that. It's Seattle. Sea Dragons. Anybody that knows anything about a sea dragon, it's in case you guys didn't know, it's a seahorse.
It really looks like a seahorse.
No, it's actually a seahorse. Like, that's actually what they're called in other parts of the world. Is the sea dragons are seahorses. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Though I have to say, with the Sea Dragons, they took a huge step back as far as the logo is concerned. But that helmet in 2020 was just so good. It was just so good. It was awesome, and I hate that they. Sorry, I'm done.
It's okay. It's okay. Completely okay. I mean, that is one of the things about this, is that there's so many different opinions, because, I mean, let's be honest, this is the third iteration of the same exact league. So, I mean, we've seen so many different variations on some of this stuff.
Can we be honest? It's really the second, because, I mean, the 2001 version we can't really count, can we? I mean, that was kind of a gimmick more than it was anything.
It was also before I was born.
Oh, that makes me feel old. Thanks.
I was going to say.
I was just graduating high school, basically.
Well, I was a little bit younger than that. I think I was, I was 12, 13 years old. But
I'm the old man of this group.
Only by barely. I'm 32, right behind you.
Jeez, I turned 39 this year. Thanks for making me feel older. Appreciate that.
We're all right. We're all young bucks as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, so moving on to this week's game, let's start with the first game of the weekend. What are you guys' predictions of for the Vegas Vipers at the Arlington Renegades in the XFL Hub, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Vegas Vipers at the Renegades. I think this is a game that you're going to see a lot of points. I think both of these offenses can score points. And even though I said I really like the Vipers on my power rankings, I think they're going to take a little bit of time, though, to get rolling. And I think Arlington takes it week 1. I'm going to go with 33-27.
Okay, 33-27.
Oh, okay. I did not realize we were predicting scores, but I can do this. One of the things that we see often with spring leagues is defenses are always ahead of the offenses. You can have one of the most powerful offenses in the league, and you can end up getting to that point. Vegas's defense might be the best defense in the league. I think that the offense for Arlington will get going eventually, but I think that this game will probably lean Vegas's way, even though I have Arlington higher on my power rankings. I think Vegas is going to win this one. Yeah, exactly. I think Vegas is going to win this one, and I'm going to go with the score of 26-20.
Okay, very fair. I'm actually going to go with Vegas as well in this one. It'll be a tighter game than I want to give them credit for, but I personally think it's going to be pretty high scoring, probably something like a 24-27. Vegas takes it on like a late field goal or something like that. Let's see what Chris has to say. Vipers 18, Renegades 17. And apparently he says seahorses are males that get pregnant and Aquaman gets them pregnant.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm just picturing Jason Momoa in an uncompromising position, so that's awesome.
This is what you get on Shady Sports Network. Not only you get sports analysis, but you get a little humor as well. So
that's me. That's me. I crack jokes at the most inopportune times. So
hey, I like it. But moving on to the Guardians at the Roughnecks. To me, this is going to be an interesting game this weekend. What do you guys think?
I do think this is really interesting. Our predictions could change later in the week if they actually announce the depth charts. Because if DeAndre Francois ends up being QB1 for the Guardians, that probably changes my pick compared to if they say it's Paxton Lynch. Same way with the Houston Roughnecks. If they decide to trot out Brandon Silvers, I don't think they're winning this game. But if they trot out Caleb Ellaby or Cole McDonald, I'm going to favor them a lot more. So in my situation, I'm going to say the Houston Roughnecks starting quarterback is Cole McDonald, and the Guardians starting quarterback is maybe Paxton Lynch, I guess. I mean, that's not what I would do, but we'll see, I guess. So I'm going to say the Houston Roughnecks take this one. I think the Guardians could get better, but I think they're going to take a little bit of time, especially if there's still so many questions on their quarterback situation that need to be answered, and this is going to be one of those games that starts trying to answer those questions. So I'm going to go with the Houston Roughnecks. I think both of these teams are going to struggle a little bit, so I'm going to go with a score of 16-10 in favor of the Roughnecks.
I can tell you that if it's Paxton Lynch versus Brandon Silvers, that the fans do not win. That is what's going to happen in this game if these two start, and unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen. I would love for Francois and Cole McDonald to be the starter, but experience is key. And unless Cole McDonald really blew Brandon Silvers out of the water, which, I mean, let's face it, it doesn't really take much, but the coaches might just kind of be like, hey, we're going to kind of trot Silvers out there. If that's the case, I hate this. I hate picking this one because this one's just so. I'm going to go with the Roughnecks because, like you, I think Orlando's going to struggle. They were ranked at the bottom of my power rankings. And I think, honestly, even if DeAndre Francois starts, I think it's going to be probably not a consistent performance to open the season. So I'm going to go with the Roughnecks. They could score 30 if Cole McDonald starts, but I'm going to say 23-15.
That's definitely very fair. I'm also going to make it a clean sweep and say that the Houston Roughnecks will win as well. I'm expecting probably a low-scoring game, again, with some quarterback struggles, much like both of you guys said. I'm expecting probably something like a 21-17 in this game. Moving on to the next game, we have St. Louis at the San Antonio Brahmas. So, by the way, all three Texas teams opening up as home teams. So, logistically, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure that that's probably the best bet in terms of spreading the viewership in week one. But anyway, moving on to our predictions. Travis, what are your thoughts on this game?
I think one of the things I'm really interested to see is the attendance for the Brahmas here in their home opener. San Antonio is a city that people's been clamoring needs a pro football team again, and so I'm really interested to see what the attendance is. But I think this is going to be a closer game than people are going to give it credit, and I'm going to go with a score of St. Louis 30 and Brahmas 27. I think it's going to end up being very close.
So I did see a thing earlier. I don't know if it was shared in the group and I saw this or if I just saw this elsewhere. Somebody tweeted that the Brahmas are at almost a sellout and that they only need like 300 more tickets supposedly. I don't know the verification on that, or I don't. The person just randomly tweeted it. It was being shared through other football groups, but I know that they had a slow start though. The tickets really weren't going because San Antonio, even though that they've been clamoring for a team, they have been burnt by spring football before, so they are very, very weary of this version of the XFL. Now, granted, 2020 XFL was not their fault. The COVID season shut it down. That was definitely not any Vince McMahon's doing or any of the 2020 versions doing. The AAF absolutely was. The 2020 version was not, but they didn't have a team in San Antonio at that time. So it's still a bitter taste. AAF and then XFL 2020 both going under back-to-back years. So I think that they're very tentatively getting there. That place is going to be rocking though if they did sell out. And I think that the atmosphere alone is going to give the Brahmas an edge that I don't think people are expecting. But even with that being said, I think St. Louis is going to win this, and I think they're going to win it pretty handedly. I think it's going to be like 28-17 at best.
I am actually going to go the opposite direction. You spoke about that quite heavily just a second ago, that the San Antonio Brahmas might have the most supported team in the league in 2023. I personally think the Brahmas home crowd will be coming out in full force every week for this team. So I think the advantage that they have at the home stadium in Alamo Dome is going to be crucial to their success in 2023. And I think they will probably be a very good home team and then struggle mightily away. So this is going to be ultimately, they're going to get off to a fast start. They're going to pick up a victory this weekend against the St. Louis Battlehawks. They're going to leave the Battlehawks reeling a little bit heading into week 2 when they face the Sea Dragons again on the road. So it'll be interesting to see how the Battlehawks can recover after this week, but I personally think they do ultimately lose this game. Moving on to the final game of the weekend, your DC Defenders are at home versus the Seattle Sea Dragon. And when I say your, I mean both of your guys. So why don't we start with Travis, and then we'll work our way back down to me.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would have loved to have been able to go to this game, but unfortunately was not able to go to the season opener. I do hope to make a game, though, eventually this year. But I think this game, if the Seattle Sea Dragons trot out Ben DiNucci, I think the DC Defenders are going to get rolling pretty early, and I think people are going to be talking about this DC Defenders defense after this game, and I mean, I'm not biased or anything, but I'm going to say the DC Defenders are going to win, and I'm going to say they're going to win pretty handily with a score of 24-13.
Yeah, I'm not going to even mince words here. I got the Defenders in this game against the Sea Dragons. The Brahmas, I almost picked for an upset, by the way, Sam. I wasn't that, but I'm not sure if it's if they can do it purely on emotion. That's what I meant to say in my little synopsis. Now, the defenders, on the other hand, I think it's just going to be they're just the more talented team. I think I love Josh Gordon. I hope he thrives. I hope he ends up dominating for the most part, like just not against my defenders. And I agree with Travis that I think that the defenders' defense is going to put a stake on what we see, and that run game is going to show exactly what we're going to be made of this year. Defenders 32, Sea Dragons 20.
That's actually extremely close to my prediction of this game. I was going to say 30-17. DC as well. I'm quickly becoming a DC fan. One of my big things when it comes to football is that I love versatility, specifically from the quarterback position. So anytime I see quarterbacks that can do a little bit of everything, it excites me on a higher level that, beyond my fandom of any specific team. So I personally think the defenders are built extremely well. Reggie Barlow and man, I'm blanking his name at the current moment, but the GM, the DPP for the defenders have done an amazing job building this team. Von Hutchins, the DPP. He's done an amazing job building this team. I personally think that they are going to shred opposing teams quite often this season, and they might end up being undefeated for a very large stretch of the season. But only time will tell. Everything looks good on paper until we actually play the games. That's why we play the games. So it'll be definitely interesting to see exactly how everything shakes out this season. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you about the XFL. I'm super excited about this weekend. Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the evening?
Yeah, which we touched on it while we were talking about our power rankings and everything, but this is all our opinions, and we're not concrete experts on it. And the thing about spring football is like Jones mentioned earlier, people's gonna come out of the woodwork and end up surprising us, and then people aren't gonna play to their potential. So our power rankings could be very irrelevant by week 5. They could be completely flip-flopped. They could be drastically different. So that's what's fun about spring football is you never know exactly what you're going to get with these teams. So I'm excited to see how it ends up turning out. But hopefully, I feel like we are educated enough to a point that we have a general understanding, but you just never know.
In just my final thoughts is, I think that it's going to be whatever coaching staff gives their offensive line the best chance to succeed. These leagues are going to be, especially after week 1, like I said, defenses are going to be ahead. So if these offensive lines, whoever has the offensive lines that are more of a cohesive gel unit, I think it's going to be, they're going to separate themselves to start off the year. Know whether or not that stays that way will change. I'm going to do an offensive line power rankings every week, starting on Mondays coming up. Just the offensive line. I'm an offensive lineman. I mean, you could tell just by this part here that I probably played offensive line. I was a center. I played all over the place, but a center primarily. So I pay attention. I watch the game a little bit differently than most people. I read it from the inside out. Most people love the running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks. I always watch the game inside out. And that's also the coach in me too, because I think that the games are won from the inside out. Like everybody wants to talk about quarterback being the most position. And I'm going to say this right here. Hot take, offensive tackle is the most important position in football. Left tackle specifically, and edge is number 2. But maybe I'm biased because of the whole O-line, D-line thing, but that's where I'm at with that.
I would say that the offensive line gets underrated. Let's look at the 2 teams that were just in the Super Bowl, for instance. Philadelphia has always been extremely, extremely heavy on drafting offensive linemen. It seems like on an every year basis while Andy Reid was the coach, we were either drafting an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman in the first round. There was no, very few exceptions during his entire 14-year run with the Eagles. And Howie Roseman's picked that up and taken it with great success over the past 5 years. And KC, same thing. They invested very heavily in the offensive line over the past couple seasons, and there's a reason why. Your quarterback cannot succeed if he's on his back. bottom line. So you need good offensive line play. And in fact, if you haven't followed leagues like the USFL and the XFL closely enough to really focus on what the guys inside the league that are building these teams have said, their biggest concern is offensive line. Finding enough talent on the offensive line to have a successful offense in the first place. Because you can find guys who can rush a passer all day long. You can find guys who can catch passes all day long. 6 foot, 200-pound receivers, they're a dime a dozen. A guy who can move well at 6'3", 300 pounds and block well without holding a guy, that's a totally different story. So I completely agree that offensive line is going to make or break a lot of these teams coming up this season. We saw it last year in the USFL. I have no doubt we'll see it again this year. So definitely going to be a lot to watch this upcoming weekend. Chris says, great show. Thank you. Philly O-line, number 1, Trench Warriors. I would agree. Kelsey Snap is a nightmare for other teams. Kelsey is a nightmare for other teams. It's sad that he might be hanging it up without a Super Bowl ring on his finger from 2022, but it is what it is. Thank you so much for joining me, Michael, Travis. I appreciate you guys. This was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing it weekly. I'm guessing the future episodes will probably not be nearly as long, given that we're kind of breaking down games and recent news rather than kind of talking about the whole league overall like we did tonight. But definitely thank you for everybody who tuned in. Again, make sure you're supporting these leagues. Go buy some merch. Make sure you're watching all the games this weekend on ESPN, ABC, wherever they may be. In order for these leagues to survive, we have to support them. So that's a big reason why we're here. So stick with us, stick with the XFL, stick with the USFL, watch some indoor football. Most importantly, support all of these leagues. So these guys have opportunities in the future. But thanks for joining us. Have a great night. And Chris, thank you for all the comments. I love that.